My mother died on a Tuesday in October, quietly, in her sleep, the way she'd always said she hoped to go. I was the one who found her the next morning, and I was the one who spent that whole first week making calls, choosing a casket, writing an obituary for a woman I thought I knew completely. I'm Eleanor. I was 44 years old when I learned that everything I understood about my mother's life before me was, at best, half the story. It started with a woman standing at the back of the funeral home, older than me, maybe by 10 years, with my mother's exact same jawline and a way of holding her hands together that I recognized instantly, because it was my own habit too, the one people always said I got from Mom. She didn't approach the casket. She stood near the door the entire service, like she was ready to leave the moment anyone noticed her. My brother Thomas saw her first and nudged me. "Do you know her?" I didn't. But something in my chest already did, in that instinctive way bodies sometimes know things before minds catch up. After the service, I walked over before I let myself think too hard about it. "I'm sorry," I said. "Have we met?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I watched her decide something. "My name is Grace," she said. "Margaret was my mother, too." The room didn't spin exactly. It just tilted very slightly, the way a boat does when you first step onto it and your body hasn't adjusted yet. Grace was 61. My mother had given birth to her in 1965, when Margaret was only 19, unmarried, and sent away by her own parents to a home for unwed mothers 3 states over. Grace was placed for adoption 6 weeks after she was born. My mother returned home a few months later and, as far as anyone in our family ever knew, simply picked up her life exactly where she'd left it. Nobody ever mentioned it. Not my grandmother, who died when I was 12. Not my father, married to my mother for 38 years, who passed 4 years before her. Not my mother herself, not once, not in 44 years of birthdays and holidays and long car rides where she told me everything, or so I thought. "I found her 3 years ago," Grace said, "through one of those genealogy sites. I wrote her a letter. She wrote back." That was the part that undid me. Not that Grace existed. Grief has room for surprises, even large ones. It was that my mother had known for 3 years, and she'd said nothing. "Did you ever meet her, in person?" "Twice," Grace said. "She came to Ohio both times. She told me she wasn't ready for anyone else to know yet. She said she needed time." Grace's voice wasn't angry. It was careful, the way you'd handle something you'd already made peace with a long time ago, alone. A week after the funeral, Grace asked if I'd want to get coffee before she flew back to Ohio. I almost said no. I had boxes to pack, a brother who wasn't speaking to either of us yet, a life that hadn't stopped just because mine had cracked open. But I said yes, because some part of me understood that if I let her leave without trying, I might spend the rest of my life wondering. We walked along the river near my mother's house instead of sitting still. It felt easier to talk side by side than face to face. For the first 20 minutes, neither of us said much of anything real. She asked about my kids. I asked about her work, a small veterinary practice outside Columbus. Ordinary things, the kind of things you'd ask a stranger you were trying not to be strangers with anymore. Then, somewhere around the second bridge, she stopped walking and said, "I used to make up versions of her. My whole life, I had a folder of guesses. Was she kind? Was she funny? Did she ever think about me on my birthday?" I didn't expect the real one to be so much like standing in a mirror. I laughed. not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with how much that sentence weighed. I don't know how to be someone's sister at 44, I admitted. I don't even know what that's supposed to feel like. Neither do I, Grace said. Maybe we just find out. It wasn't graceful. There were long silences on that walk, and one moment where she asked about our father, our shared mother's husband, and I realized, watching her face, that some tiny part of her had spent 60 years wondering if a whole family had existed just an arm's length away, living a life that could have included her and chose not to. I didn't have a good answer for that. I still don't, entirely. 2 weeks after the funeral, going through my mother's things, I found a small, locked box in the back of her closet, the kind you'd keep important documents in. It took me another week to work up the nerve to force it open. Inside were letters, dozens of them, going back 3 years, in Grace's handwriting and my mother's both, copies my mother had kept of her own replies. Beneath the letters was a thinner folder, and inside it, receipts, small ones going back decades, long before Grace and my mother had ever exchanged a single letter. A veterinary school tuition payment from 1987, made anonymously through a lawyer's office in Columbus. A hospital bill from 2003, paid the same way. A dozen more, scattered across 30 years. Every one of them tracing back to a name I didn't recognize until I looked him up. A private investigator my mother had quietly hired the year I turned 6 and kept paying, on and off, for the rest of her life. Just to know that Grace was safe, that she was fed, that she was, somewhere out there, all right. My mother had never met her daughter face to face until 3 years ago, but she had never once, in 60 years, actually let her go. Beneath the receipts was a single page, handwritten, addressed to me. Eleanor, if you're reading this, I didn't find the courage in time, and I'm sorry for that more than I can say. I want you to know why, because I think you, of everyone, will understand it, even if you're angry with me first. When I was 19, I was not safe in my own father's house, and I could not raise a daughter under that roof and protect her from what I couldn't fully protect myself from. I have never said that sentence out loud to another living person, and I am not going to say more of it here. It is enough, I think, for you to know that giving Grace up cost me something I spent the rest of my life quietly paying for, in every way I could manage, without ever having to explain it. I watched from a distance for 60 years because I told myself watching was safer than reaching. I was wrong about that, I think, but I understand why 19-year-old me believed it, and I have never had the heart to be angry at her for it. I am only asking you to understand that some silences are not selfishness. Some of them are the only shelter a person knows how to build. Please, if you can find it in yourself, know your sister. She is, in every way that matters, exactly like you. Careful, steady, slow to trust, quick to love once she does. I called Grace the next morning and read her the letter over the phone because some things need a voice attached to them, even a shaking one. When I got to the part about the tuition, about the hospital bill, I heard her go completely silent on the other end. I always wondered how that money appeared, she finally said. I asked my adoptive parents once. They said they didn't know either. I thought maybe it was a scholarship I'd forgotten applying for. Her voice cracked on the last word. She was there the whole time. She was just behind glass. Thomas took longer to come around, and for a while I understood why. The idea that our mother had carried something that large, that specific, across an entire childhood of dinner tables was hard to hold next to the memory of her making pancakes every Sunday like nothing in the world was wrong. "I don't know how she did that," he told me once, months later. Held all of that and still showed up every single Sunday. "I don't think anything was wrong for her by the time we came along," I said. "I think we were the part that turned out right. And Grace was the part she never stopped protecting, even when it looked like nothing at all." Grace came to Thanksgiving this year. She sat across from me at the table my mother used for 40 years, and at one point, without either of us planning it, we both reached for the gravy at the exact same time and stopped and laughed at the same small, startled sound. Caught me watching her fold a dish towel in half, then in half again, smoothing each crease with her thumb before setting it down. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "You just fold things exactly like she did." Grace went still for a second, towel in hand, and something passed over her face that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite grief either. Something closer to recognition, arriving 61 years late and landing anyway. "So tell me, if someone loved you for 60 years from behind a wall of silence, quietly making sure you were safe without ever once saying so, would that be enough of a love to call it that? Or does a shelter built in secret still leave the people outside it something to grieve?"